Hey there, you're listening to the Girls Talking Life podcast, and I'm your host, Johanna. If you're like me, you love time with friends. I always leave feeling encouraged, inspired to try something different, or I've learned something new. So why not continue to grow even when we can't be with our girlfriends? We're not made to do life on our own. So in each episode of this show, I'll bring you a girl and her story to give you refreshing ideas to stir your soul. Let's walk this road together. Are you ready to talk life? Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you chose to spend some time here. Girls Talking Life is turning 2 this month and we're celebrating. I want to give you an extra special thank you for listening. It means so much to me that you're here, and I have the perfect way for you to help me celebrate. A giveaway. You could win a $50 Amazon gift card. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to the Girls Talking Life newsletter. Go to girlstalkinglife.com to sign up or find the link in the show notes. One lucky listener will have an extra $50 to spend just as we head into the Christmas gift buying season. The last day to enter is Wednesday, November 25th at noon Eastern. The winner will be chosen at random and announced the same day. Best of luck. Do you find yourself struggling to see the gifts of the season you're in? Did you know that the daily practice of gratitude has the power to impact the neurotransmitters in your brain? Have you ever wanted to implement a weekly Sabbath into your family's rhythm? Today on the show, I'm talking with Amber Cullum. Amber is wife to Sam, mom of 3, and the host of the Grace Enough podcast. We are talking about getting rest, Sabbath, and giving thanks, daily practice of gratitude. Amber shares what these practices look like for her and her family, why they're important to their family culture, and the challenges and benefits she's seen so far. Tara Lee Cobble, host of the Bible Recap, says, "Gratitude helps us rightly view God. When we rightly view God, we love Him more. When we love Him more, our hearts are drawn away from sin, and it doesn't hold the power over us that it once did." Here is my conversation with Amber. Hey there, Amber. Thanks so much for coming on Girls Talking Life.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a delight to be here with you.
I would love to know about you. Who are the people in your life? What do you do? What do your days look like?
Yeah, so I am a mom to 3. I have a 10-year-old boy, an 8-year-old girl, and a 4-year-old boy. I am wife to Sam, and we just got a new puppy, which we were talking about a little bit earlier.
Yes.
I mean, he's 8 weeks old, and so now we have Charlie as a part of our family. So I think my days coming up are going to look a lot like going outside every hour to train this puppy.
Right.
Potty training and, all the things with puppies. But, my days are spent at home. I am a physical therapist by trade, but I have been at home with my kids for, I want to say 8 years now since my daughter was born. And some days that is really a delight, and some days it's really hard, and I wonder why I'm not working. But I know if I worked every day, I would be thinking the exact same thing.
Right.
That's just part of living in this world.
All mamas can relate to that, I think, one way or the other.
That's right. No matter what choice, and I'm grateful that I get to make that choice, that I'm able to stay home, because it is ultimately a gift. In COVID-19, I think everybody feels like they're homeschooling a bit. My kids, thankfully, go to a university model school where they go to school 2 days a week and then they're homeschooled the other 3 days. So that schedule is fairly normal for us. And it's been great for my kids. They haven't always been in that model, but I enjoy having them at home and getting to spend more time with them and getting them to really, they get to spend more time with each other. Which some parents kind of shudder over, but I have seen my oldest son and my youngest son, develop a relationship that I don't think they would have otherwise, because there's, 5-6 year age gap. So that's kind of what my days look like. They're pretty simple.
Now, do your kids do schoolwork on their days home?
They do. So when I say homeschool on those 3 off days, I have a lesson plan from their teachers for every subject, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And so they learn most new concepts at school. And then we do a lot more of the follow-up at home. So their worksheets and math facts and phonics and, their history projects, more of those types of things are done at home.
Okay, that's so interesting because my kids, because of COVID, are on a hybrid schedule that looks very similar to that.
Yeah.
I don't need to be quite as hands-on. Their
Yeah.
teachers, say that everything that they do, depending on the age, should be pretty self-directed.
Yes.
But I enjoy it too. So far, so good. In addition to your duties at home, you also have a podcast called Grace Enough. Tell me a little bit about why you decided to start that and what it's about.
Yeah. So several years ago, I think like a lot of moms, you have a little bit of a desire to just be doing something else, engaging your mind and being creative. And something I really love doing is connecting with women. And I've always just enjoyed learning more about their backstories and then connecting them with other people. Sometimes I just get so excited when someone has an interest and then I can say, oh, I know this person over here who does that. Let me, connect the two of you. And so a few years ago, I was really just thinking through what would allow me to do that. If I could just dream again and do anything right now, we're not talking about getting paid. We're talking about all the time in the world. What would it be? And it really was like, oh, I would love to get paid to hang out with people and get to know them and learn more about God's word and God's people. And that kind of led to podcasting. It kind of combines all of those things together. And so I did process through that and pray through that for about a year before I just decided, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to commit to a year. And so I think we're 85 episodes in. I'm still doing it.
And still loving it?
I do. It's really great. I mean, you podcast, you get to connect with so many people. It's just a really nice way to see how God is working in the lives of people from so many different backgrounds.
Well, when I asked you to come on and talk about the topics that I asked you to talk about, gratitude and Sabbath, I hadn't really considered that they're both spiritual disciplines.
Yeah.
These are both things that you've introduced into your life, into the rhythm of your days. And I want to talk about gratitude first.
Sure.
The Bible talks about giving thanks in lots of places. And I know that's how I start most of my prayers, with thanking the Lord for his gifts. But you've added this into your daily routine. Just share with us what the inspiration behind intentionally placing this as a practice in your day was.
Yeah, so I grew up in a family where my mom and dad were both home. I had one sister who was 3 years older than me. I was very, very fortunate to grow up in a smaller community where I was around grandparents all the time, aunts, uncles, cousins. So, I feel like I had a really excellent childhood. And when it just came to the basics of I felt safe and I felt loved and I felt joy as a result of my childhood. But I can't say that my family was particularly great at practicing gratitude. We just tend to be a glass half empty kind of people. And I do believe that some people are naturally bent more that direction. Mm-hmm. However, I do think it's something that we learn as well. And so I got married and I had my first child. We had moved to Florida the year before. It was just me and my husband and my son, but his whole side of the family lived in Florida. And so I had left Kentucky, all that I knew there, and I was just kind of frustrated about it. I was not very happy. And so my husband during that time would just, when he would hear me grumbling and everything's going wrong, he would stop and say, tell me 5 things that you're thankful for. And it just irritated me to no end. I was just like, oh, that does not help.
Just grumble with me.
That's right. Or just let me, go down this path. And so I would find myself being even more irritated with him. But once I would let the hardness just soften a bit, and even if I wouldn't tell him 5 things, in my mind, that switched something in me. So even if I didn't say it out loud in my head, I would go over a few things. And I did begin to notice when I did that, my attitude shifted. And so that was kind of where it started. And then I had my first child it was just difficult. He was not a great sleeper. We had feeding issues. So many young moms can relate to that. Yes. Your first child, I think in particularly, if they were challenging, it can just be like you're so confused because you have no idea what to even look for or what is even going on. And so it was during that time that Ann Voskamp was doing, her daily gratitude. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start writing down 10 things every day that I'm thankful for, maybe more, but certainly not less. And I did that. I did it until I made it to 1,000. I began putting it on my blog on a weekly basis, just primarily as a remembrance, right?
Okay, a little accountability for you too.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then I had friends who were like, I'm going to do it too. And at that point, I knew people all around were doing it. I mean, it was huge because Anne would share, you could share your link there. And if anybody remembers, it was before her first book came out, any of that. And it was always so inspiring to me. But then once my friends started doing it too, we all just started realizing like this is really changing us, because it wasn't always that you were thankful for these huge, magnificent things. Sometimes it was, Lord, thank you today that I was able to brush my teeth. Because when you're a mama of a new baby, you took that for granted. And that can sometimes be really hard. Mm-hmm. And so I did that, and I just kept going after 1,000. And then we led, a friend and I led the book club when her first book came out. And that was just so helpful for me and for others in the group. And it just led me on this journey of realizing how good gratitude is, a consistent practice. And even from that point until now, it's not like I never grumble. It's not like my husband never has to look at me. He still will at times stop and say, oh, the runaway train, it's like taking place right now. But as I introduced that discipline into my life, it was something that even with my kids, we do it before bed now. We do it around our dinner table. Do we ever miss doing it? Absolutely. But it's so easy to come back around and say, this is not about perfection. It really is about progress. And it's about realizing that gratitude is something that stops us dead in our tracks and really makes us make a 180 shift. It does something in our brain to refocus us on the gifts that God is putting in our lives every day, every moment, because it's easy to miss those, particularly when we're just constantly bombarded with information and distraction and sometimes all the bad going on in the world. Uh-huh. And so that's kind of how it got started.
Okay. Well, I love the idea of stopping to reflect and remember, because like you said, if we don't intentionally do it, we can just continue on with the rat race, so to speak. And then there's something about naming the thing, naming the gift.
Yes. That
does something to our soul.
Yeah. Well, and I think about the verse when it does say, so many of us know it. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, basically bring it to the Lord.
Yeah.
Well, I think we can get so caught up on the do not be anxious. We see do not and we just think, oh, if I strive harder, I won't be. And then we feel guilty when that doesn't work. But I've learned when it comes to Scripture, instead of focusing so much on the do not, focus more on what is the antidote. What is something that helps us actually stop it? Because I don't think the goal is truly, I think the goal is never to do it again. But ultimately, God knows that we are human. And so we're always going to have these patterns in our lives that we're struggling against. That's just the struggle against flesh and blood.
Right.
And so when it says do not be anxious, but in everything, it's like, that's what's going to stop the train. That's what's going to help stop the anxiety is, okay, this practice of, let me just say 5 things that I'm thankful for. And for some people, it may be that you have to do that every hour. But I just remember with my second child, I had postpartum depression that was, it was just like a freight train. It was like a runaway freight train. I wasn't happy. You didn't know why. You're like, why do I feel so miserable? I don't have any reason to feel miserable. But the little glimmers of hope that would come would be in some of those moments of, I'm outside and I see the bee pollinating the flower. And I just say, Lord, I'm struggling right now, but I thank you for that. Because I know that that's a gift right now, to just watch your active work through this little creature. And so I think it just helps get you in tune a little bit more to all the ways that God is at work in the lives around us.
I have been at the gym before and running on the treadmill, and, this workout was stretched out before me and it was tough. And just kind of taking my mind away from what my body was doing and thanking God for, thank you, that I have legs to run and that this is my, this part of my body is functioning as it should. And, this is my age, but I can still run at this speed. And
it's really, really true. And we know, even if you look at Thanksgiving from a secular perspective, there's nobody out there going, don't give thanks, it's a bad thing. So, even if you take everything Christian off the table, which I do not want to do because I feel like all gifts are from God. But even when you do, we know it's a practice that does change the actual makeup of our brain. They've researched this. And so I don't feel like science and God stand independent of one another, because I'm like, yeah, God knew that all along. He created it. He created us that way. Like, he didn't need us to study and realize, like, oh, wow, your brain synapses can actually change from the power of, quote unquote, positive thinking. That's Thanksgiving, right? And then my mother-in-law a few weeks ago pointed out, don't take for granted that Thanksgiving is not just a practice. It is actually praying to the living God. When you are giving God thanks, that is praying to him. And so it's another way to practice the presence of God, particularly when you're doing it throughout your day. And so that was the thing. I just started writing them down first because that was the only way I knew how to begin to do it consistently. Now, my oldest son is 10 years old. It's just something that's much more, I wake up and there are things that I think about, that I give thanks for when we're going to bed. But then throughout the day, I notice, little things. Oh, that acorn on the ground. Thank you, God, for that. That's food for the squirrels. And, I could just go on and on. It sounds so cheesy, but it's true.
I love that idea about it being prayer, just communion throughout your day with God.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that there's one right way to do it necessarily, because everyone will have a way to do it that makes sense for them individually. But do you have any ideas on how someone would go about finding a rhythm to practice this?
Yeah, that's where I do feel like journaling can sometimes just be one of our best tools. And sometimes people will say, I'm just not a journaler. But in the big picture, when you just ask yourself, what can I do to consistently begin practicing? Like, what do you do when you go to the grocery? Are you a list maker, or are you someone who puts it in your phone? Are you somebody who keeps it in your mind? And so I always feel like when you're trying to establish any practice, think about how you have done things successfully in the past. Some people they study differently. And so you kind of know what gets you to actually follow through on something. And then that's what you need to use to implement Thanksgiving. I feel like writing it down is one of the best tools. And so leaving a journal on maybe your bar in your kitchen or your countertop in your bathroom, somewhere you visit frequently, where even if you're not writing down something at that very moment that you're thankful for, maybe it's something you thought about earlier. That's what I would do. I do think, being accountable to someone else and saying like, hey, could we go after this and, share our joy points for the next, that was a challenge of a friend of mine. Let's see if we can collect 100 joy points in the next month. And so it was kind of this challenge back and forth between each other, but that was basically giving thanks. So those are two practices that I would say. And then if you have a family, I mean, there's just no better place than to teach your children how to give thanks than around the dinner table, the breakfast table, whatever meal you may share together. In the car on the way home from school, I will find myself at times, kids, give me 2 things you're thankful for from today. And man, they get so annoyed with that sometimes. But I know that the reason my husband asked me that when, 12 years ago, over and over again, is because he grew up in a house where his mom would put basically a large piece of paper on the wall. And she would write down things she was thankful for because she said, I struggled so much that I needed to see it before me to focus on what I did have instead of what I didn't have. And so if you start it in your kids now, they will carry that through their lives. And so that's a few of the tips that I would have.
I love those. I am a list maker, so writing it down is so helpful for me. Pen to paper.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt for just a minute to tell you how you can support the show. Prep Dish is a healthy subscription-based meal plan service. And when you sign up, you receive weekly emails that contain your menu for the week, an organized grocery list, and easy-to-follow instructions for prepping your meals ahead of time. After a couple hours, all your meals are ready for the entire week. In fact, Monday for me is prep day, so I just finished prepping all my meals for the week. And let me tell you, it feels fantastic to have that done. No more answering the question, what's for dinner? Mealtime stress is replaced with a healthy whole food meal made by you. Prep Dish is offering a 50% off sale of all of their products and subscriptions. The sale will run from Friday, November 27th through Monday, November 30th. So Black Friday through Cyber Monday. But you can try it before you buy it. For a 2-week free trial, go to prepdish.com/girlstalkinglife. You also may have heard me talk about Faster Way to Fat Loss, and I use this meal planning service in conjunction with that program too. Absolutely fabulous. If you do choose to sign up for a subscription from Prep Dish, Girls Talking Life will receive a small commission that will go right back into supporting the show. Back to my conversation. One thing we did with our family, it was a few Thanksgivings ago, I actually need to get that back out, was a thankful tree.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Where everyone got some pieces of paper to hang on the tree as leaves. Mm-hmm. And they wrote what they were thankful for on each one. And that was a really fun exercise.
We love doing that. Something that we have done every single year since Bennett was probably 1 is very similar to the thankful tree, but I'll, at the dollar spot or wherever, purchase just some of the paper leaves. They'll have leaves, turkeys, pumpkins, sometimes acorns. And we will every night at dinner just write down what we're thankful for. And then we've taped it along our door frame that's right by.
Oh, I like that.
And so sometimes it's just simple things like that visual reminder that we know that it helps us. I mean, that's the reason why we put notes in our car to remember to, we got to stop and get milk. Like we're just those kind of people. And so we never need to feel guilty about setting those things out. And sometimes people may say, oh, but I don't want anyone to see what I'm writing in there. But, it's a gift to your family. So just let them see it. I struggle too. That's what I tell my kids. Mommy struggles too. That's why I have to keep this Thanksgiving list down here because I'm feeling real grumbly lately. They know.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Amber. I wanna move into our second discipline, and that is Sabbath. And you've introduced this rhythm into your week with your family. Yeah. I know that we're supposed to observe it. I do take time on the weekends to rest, but I am not particularly good about being disciplined with this. What was your motivation behind making it an intentional part of your family's week?
Well, just like you, we weren't practicing it at all. Just, go 100 miles an hour and you rest when there's extra time. And my husband is, he's an employer, so he's responsible for employees, and he just never really gets a break. I mean, there is very little break when you're the one responsible for other people. And so in November, I think, of last year, so of 2019, it may have been before that, we were listening to some sermons and just some podcasts through Family Teams is the organization that we've been a part of. Jeff Bethke did a sermon, and he was talking about the mass exodus of youth in the church. And research has shown that two religions where they have the least amount of youth leaving the church are actually the Jewish religion and Mormons. And part of what they found is because they have this consistent rhythm of large family meal times. Not meal times like where we may be running in and out from a sport and everyone just, powwows around the table for 5 minutes and eats, which I think that's phenomenal. And we do it almost every night at this season in our lives. But true weekly meal times where you linger and you have conversation and you're just open to not hurrying off to the next distraction or the next thing. And so Jeff Bethke then went on to talk about Sabbath and why they had introduced that into their family. And that was one of the big reasons. And my husband and I just started talking about, this is something about family culture. Again, if you take religion out of it completely, what do we want the identity of our family to be? Now, we can't really separate the two in our family because we are believers. And so we associate pretty much everything that we do with Jesus.
Yeah.
But even when you take it out, I think a lot of us would say we want our family culture, our kids to feel safe, feel like that there's a place to have open and honest conversation. And there's a place where they feel like they can just rest. And we don't provide that a lot of times because it's hard. And so that's what first led us to begin on Friday evenings, starting around 5 p.m. We kick off our Sabbath. We start with a Shabbat meal, which is just a meal that the Jewish people also partake in. It's for us, we don't do a particular meal every week, but it is very celebratory for us. So we have special plates that we only use on Friday night and special cups, and the kids get a special drink that they only get on Friday night. Now, that is not something that has to be done, but the idea behind it from, again, family teams was this is setting something apart. It's setting a tradition to say this is part of our family culture. And that tends to be what gets passed on throughout time a lot more than things we just run back and forth and do haphazardly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. I mean, we see that in even our repetition of creeds and doxology and, songs we sing over and over again. Pretty much anything that is repetitive and seems set apart, holidays, we remember those. And so that is a lot of why, God said, work, labor for 6 days, and then on the seventh day, set that apart as holy for me. He didn't say that so we would feel guilty and do no work and be pharisaical about it. He said it because he wants us to just trust that he is going to provide for us and that our physical, mental, emotional bodies actually need rest. Not just vegging in front of the TV. That can be restful, but does that truly bring rest to your soul? I mean, most of us cannot say that it does.
No.
Right. I mean, some can, but I think if you dig a little bit more into that, we would still find that we are just hurried. And how much time are we spending really just practicing the presence of the living God? It's hard to do it. And so we implemented that, and we only go through 12 noon on Saturday right now because it is such a challenge for us to actually make it all the way until 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. And so that is advice that I give to people is it's not about rules. It's not about have-tos. It's not about perfection. It's really about just taking a step in the direction of saying, you know what, God, I'm going to trust that all of this other stuff can get done in 6 days. The laundry, do the beds need to be made on my Sabbath? Like, do they really need to, or is this a control thing? And that's what we've learned with Sabbath is how much it exposes, and I should speak for myself, but I know my husband would agree, it exposes just how much we feel like we need control, just how much we lack trust. And as we practice it more and more and more, we're learning to trust more, to let go of control more. And so I know that's a very, very long answer, but it is something really that we're passionate about.
Okay, well, you touched on this just briefly, but talk to me a little bit more about the difference between physical rest and spiritual rest.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting topic. And actually, I interviewed Dr. Dalton. Well, she goes by Dr. Sandra on my podcast a while back about her book called Sacred Rest. And she actually goes into 7 areas of rest and how so often the reason why we wake up in the morning after we've physically rested still tired is because that's not necessarily the rest that we're deficit in. There are these other areas, emotional rest, social rest, sensory rest, and, spiritual rest, how that plays into it is, are we just doing for God, or are we spending any time actually being with Him? I didn't realize how much I didn't separate or understand the two until I was asked the question, when you are doing for God, do you actually ever think about Him being with you? And so I thought about that and I thought, wow, most of the time I totally separate the two in the sense of I can be teaching God's word to a group of 5-year-olds and totally not be aware of the fact that the living God is in the room with me. I think that's natural because we get into, do mode.
Right.
And so that spiritual rest really is just a practice of restraint. I'm going to stop doing for God and I'm going to just practice being with Him, communing with Him, watching His work in the world around me. And it's hard. It's not like you do it and you just feel so recharged at the end. That's not the case at all. What we have found is that we actually feel a little more anxious and a little more uncomfortable and a little more like we don't know what to do. But that's because we're actually learning still. We have not practiced it long enough to actually feel like we can trust God fully to just fill us up. So that's something that I say to people because I don't want anyone to think that we have 3 kids at home and we're all singing Kumbaya and it's just going perfect until 12 noon. No, a lot of times it's like, okay, come back. What's the purpose? You have to be really intentional about how you're going to rest. You know, what helps you rest? That's one of the questions we ask our kid. When do you feel the most rested? When do you feel the closest to Jesus? Those are the 2 really big questions we've asked our kids. And then we've encouraged them to do those things during Sabbath. And that's worked for us too, but we're still a big time work in progress.
I listened to an episode that you and your husband actually discuss your Sabbath practices on your show. And you say that, if you use your mind, let's say you're an analyst. So
That's
you're
right.
using your mind for your professional job all week long. Then you want to do something different, something maybe physical that you enjoy, that you feel restores your soul on your Sabbath time. Or vice versa. If you have manual labor that you're doing all week long, you want to take a break from that and refocus in a mental way.
That's right.
On the Lord.
Yeah, and that's something that Dr. Matthew Sleeth shares in his book, 24/6. It's an amazing book I would recommend. And he was on my show and he shares that. And that really resonated with my husband because he does do so much mental work all week. And it would, some people could say, oh, but woodworking, that's working, if we're looking at it from the legalist perspective.
Right.
But that's where that quote is just, it's gold because you do the things that actually help you restore your relationship with the Lord. And sometimes we can focus most on Jesus when we are working with our hands. And for my husband, that's it. Taking a run for me is very restorative for me. It's not all about doing nothing, but instead recharging away from what you're usually doing.
I think that's a great way to look at it. I listened to a pastor that I enjoy talk about this as well. And he stresses, Sabbath wasn't, how does it go? Man wasn't made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made
for man. That's right.
It is a gift from God to us.
That's right. And it is interesting because we can get so legalistic about it. And it's like no one's forcing you to do it. But I will say, once you start, as hard as it can be sometimes to sit in that tension of, I just want to get up and do stuff. Once you kind of make it through that, you start seeing some things that you enjoy and the freedom to do those things without feeling so enslaved to work that you just feel free to do them and be like, no, it's okay. I want to take my daughter out to breakfast this morning and I enjoy that. Everything else will still be there later. And so I'm going to spend this time with her because it's restful to both of us. And so you do start seeing that once you kind of push through some of the tension of, I'm not doing anything. That's just how our brains are wired in our culture today.
Well, when you decided to do this, was everybody in your family on board, or did you have any pushback? What did that look like? What were your challenges?
Yeah, I mean, my 4-year-old's still the challenge. I mean, he's 4, right? And so I think that's the thing, and if you listen to the episode, which you said you did, it's all about how we implemented it with our family. And so part of the pushback is, the kids just want to keep going and doing. And the technology is a pushback, not just for them, but for my husband and I. To the point where even in the last month, I've said, oh my goodness, we're creeping back into this where, the phone's still out down here at 8 o'clock. Again, this is not from a legalistic perspective, but it's from a perspective of unless I slow myself down, it doesn't do me any good. I'm not really getting recharged. So those are probably the biggest pushbacks is with the kids, they want to just still be able to do their normal tech routines, but we've asked them, my 10-year-old particularly can say, no, I don't feel rested after I'm finished. But the 4-year-old just has no idea. So he's just going 190 miles an hour no matter what right now. And then the other pushback, is our own flesh longing to just scroll on the phone. And again, nobody's forcing anybody to put those things away. But for us, we know that we're not really resting when we're just so connected digitally.
Right. Distraction usually does not equal rest.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So those are the biggest ones.
And then what have you seen as far as benefits for your family?
Well, my kids look forward to Friday night meals a lot. And we, after our mealtime, play games. And in between that, we take like 5 to 10 minutes where everybody is just off doing their own quiet thing. And that gives my husband and I a few moments to just quiet our minds after having cooked dinner. And again, it's not this laborious cooking of dinner, but it is something they look forward to because they know it's just a special time set aside for us. And they know, okay, mom and dad are available. We get to have really interesting conversation, and it has become so much a part of our family culture that the kids have even looked at friends already and said, no, we have Shabbat tonight. We can't do that. And so that has been a benefit. It has helped my husband and I mentioned this earlier, realize how much we struggle to truly trust God to provide for us. And that's been a blessing because I've known that intermittently throughout my life, but I just didn't realize how much I really wasn't trusting him until I said, okay, I'm really not going to do anything it's not even 24 hours.
But it's tough though, when you're in your own home and there are things that need done. I understand.
It is so tough. And so, those are just a few of the blessings. The other ones are some conversations that it has produced with my children, particularly, again, my 10-year-old, because he's the one that's at the age where he's beginning to understand, hey, Mom, do you think I could do this or do you think I shouldn't because it's Sabbath? Well, and then you start talking about what's the purpose of Sabbath, because he can be my one that's a little bit more legalistic anyways. So it's opened doors to conversations about Scripture well beyond Deuteronomy and Exodus when they first give the command to just talk about what's the purpose. we don't want to be pharisaical. And so of all the blessings, those are probably the three top ones that I would share.
Having those conversations with your son is building that into his life. And like you said in the beginning, with gratitude, that will be carried with him into adulthood as well.
That's right.
Wow. Well, thank you. You've given me some really great ideas.
You're welcome. I mean, I would definitely encourage anybody to just start small, but just start. It's amazing what happens when you do.
Next, I would love to know about you and your favorite 5.
All right.
What are 5 things that you're eating or drinking or wearing or doing right now that are your favorites?
I love when you ask this question because, it just makes you think, what are some of my favorite things? So the first thing is the shampoo bar. Do you use a shampoo bar yet?
No, I don't even know what that is.
So my husband and I we've tried more and more to kind of cut back on just how wasteful we are. And so a shampoo bar, it looks like soap, but it's shampoo. And I thought, no way that's going to work.
Okay. So it doesn't have a bottle.
It's just a bar.
Okay.
That's right. And I've been so surprised how well it works. So now I'm kind of like obsessed with it because you just put the bar on your head and you kind of like lather it in and it lathers up really, really well. And I'm just a little bit obsessed with it. I am not going to lie.
I'm very interested in that.
So that's my first one. The second one is Mr. Penn Bible highlighters. I don't know where those have been my whole life, but I got these highlighters after I saw them on an Instagram, a friend's stories. And you can like highlight in your Bible and it doesn't bleed through.
Nice.
I mean, where have they been? They've probably been out for 15 years and I just never knew it. But I'm obsessed with those two because I'm a person who writes in my Bible a lot. And then leather earrings. I love leather earrings. Do you like leather earrings?
I do.
I know. And then so many social enterprises make them, which just makes them even better, right? Because I feel like I can buy them there's a local place called Design for Joy and Hope and Vine, and they each help women. And so I love those. There's a new book that I'm reading. Alyssa Childers is an apologist, and she became an apologist as a result of having her faith challenged like progressively in a church setting, actually by a pastor. And so she wrote this book called Another Gospel, and I just feel like it's so crucial to our time with all the progressive Christianity. So that is my absolute favorite book right now. And then lastly, as we go into fall, I love candles in the fall. There's just something about when the weather starts getting cooler that I just all of a sudden find myself using them all the time. And so Candleberry, I think it's called vanilla crumb cake candle. Oh my gosh, it's just delightful.
That sounds very nice.
So I will burn that every day until I bring out, my balsam fir scent for Christmas. So those are some of my favorite things.
I love those. And I can completely relate to feeling like it's time to warm our house up for fall.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, fall's the best.
Well, Amber, I have loved talking with you. I like all the things that you've implemented and what you have to say about them and why, back to the original, why should I want to implement this into my life? I've really just enjoyed hearing all about that, and nothing that you've described seems overwhelming, which again is so important for mamas and families right now.
Absolutely.
And thank you for honestly sharing your family's experiences. It doesn't go perfect every time, and we need to hear that too.
That's right. Well, thank you for having me. It's been a joy to be with you.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Amber. If you find yourself struggling to see the gifts of the season you're in, I challenge you to start writing down what you're thankful for on a daily basis, just like Amber did. And if a rhythm of Sabbath is something you'd like to add to your family's culture, be sure to find the resources that Amber talked about in the show notes and take a listen to the Grace Enough podcast. Don't forget, Girls Talking Life is celebrating 2 years of podcasting. Subscribe to the GTL newsletter for a chance to win. And friends, don't let the conversation stop when the show is over. Share your stories and start your own conversations with the girls in your life. I'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Thanks for tuning in.